A final warning is a final weakness. Admiral Kalen Vance stood on the command deck of the Terran fleet ship Resolute. His form a study in stillness against the slow swirl of galactic dust on the main view screen. Before them lay the Kepler 186 system, a fragile jewel of 5 worlds, one of which, the fifth, was a garden. A garden now under siege. Opposing his fleet was the Hegemony's 7th Chastisement Flotilla, a collection of brutalist gray wedges that bled raw power into the void. At the center of the screen, stark and unblinking, a crimson timer counted down 03:58:17. The ultimatum had been as predictable as it was arrogant. The civilian convoy designated Failsafe 4 was to retreat beyond the system's heliopause. The Terran fleet was to withdraw and cede the sector to Hegemony guardianship. Failure to comply would result in the summary destruction of Failsafe 4 and its 20 million tons of atmospheric processors, medical supplies, and terraforming catalysts. The Hegemony did not negotiate. Report Vance said, his voice calm, measured. It was a practiced calm, a shield against the fury simmering beneath. His executive officer, Commander Eva Rostova, turned from her station. "No change, Admiral. The Justicar's fleet remains in a classic blockade formation, bracketing the convoy's approach vector. They are powered up, weapons hot. They believe their position is unassailable. They believe wrong." On a gantry far below the command deck, a young technician named Anya adjusted the coolant flow to a secondary power conduit. She could feel the ship's thrum through the soles of her boots, a deep and patient hum that was the only parent she had ever known. Her family wasn't on this warship. They were on Kepler 186F, waiting for the medicine in Failsafe 4's hold. She ran a diagnostic, her knuckles brushing against the cold metal casing. She wasn't just maintaining a system. She was holding a lifeline. Anya sent a silent prayer into the ship's hum. Vance watched the tactical display, where the fleet-mined Lyceum rendered the situation in streams of cold, hard data. Lyceum's icon, a simple pulsating lattice of light, glowed beside the main screen. Options, Lyceum, the Justicar's doctrine is rigid. Admiral, the synthesized voice of the AI, replied smooth as chilled helium. Probability suggests a 94% chance they will fire on the convoy at the ultimatum's conclusion. I can project several kinetic strike packages that would disable their lead cruisers before they can act. A decapitation strike offers the highest probability of success. Vance shook his head slightly. We aren't here to teach them how to die, Lyceum. We're here to teach them how to think. Sometimes the only lesson is a reckoning. Rostova nodded in agreement. Their formation is arrogant. It's designed to intimidate, not to fight a peer. They have their heaviest ships forward, exposing their command carrier to a flanking maneuver if we could break their screen. The console before her shimmered, displaying the energy signatures of the enemy fleet. A low-level hum vibrated through the deck plates, the sound of the Resolute's immense energy core holding steady. They expect a brawl or a retreat, Vance mused, his eyes fixed on the Justicar's flagship, the Indomitable Will. They've left no room in their doctrine for a third option. He tapped a control on his command chair, bringing up the schematics for a system his fleet had perfected. So we shall provide one. Commander, signal the fleet. Prepare to deploy the mirror lattice. A plan began to form, not of violence but of misdirection. He would show them a reflection of their own inflexibility, a mystery for them to solve while the real prize slipped through their fingers. Lyceum flagged a subtle energy distortion near the enemy's forward pickets, a ghost in the machine too faint to be anything but sensor noise. Vance noted it, but filed it away. One problem at a time. Their pride is the fulcrum we will use to move them. The order rippled through the Terran fleet. From the bellies of cruisers and the launch tubes of destroyers, tens of thousands of gossamer-thin sails unfurled into the void. Each one, no bigger than a door, was a marvel of Terran engineering, a programmable surface capable of reflecting, absorbing, or amplifying energy with pinpoint precision. They arranged themselves in a vast, intricate pattern, a shimmering curtain of light drawn across the darkness. The console glare intensified on the bridge as the lattice came online. "Lattice array is active," Rostova confirmed, her voice tight with focus. "We are projecting a ghost fleet signature, vectoring away from the convoy at 0.7 impulse. It mimics our ship's turning tail. Magnify the Resolute's energy signature in the reflection by 10%, Vance ordered. Make them think the flagship is leading the retreat. Make it an obvious, almost cowardly maneuver." Lyceum's synthesized voice added a detail. "I have added a subtle power fluctuation to the Phantom signature, consistent with a hastily rerouted energy grid. It will appear authentic to their tactical sensors." The bigger the lie, the more room truth has to maneuver. Inside the medical freighter, St. Jude, part of the failsafe convoy, a doctor checked the cryostasis seals on a crate of tailored retrovirals. Dr. Eris Thorne had spent 5 years developing these treatments for the phage sweeping through Kepler 186F's settlements. He could hear the low thrum of his ship's engines, feel the tension in the metal hull. He looked out a small porthole at the distant Terran warships, silver needles against black velvet. They were his only hope. He saw a flash of light, the mirror lattice deploying, and his heart hammered against his ribs. On the bridge of the indomitable will, Justicar Valerius sneered at his tactical display. The Terran fleet was turning just as the doctrine predicted. Their flagship's energy signature was blooming, a clear sign of a panicked jump drive spool-up. He had seen it 100 times before. Lesser species always broke before the Hegemony's resolve. "They run," he declared to his bridge crew. "Their cowardice is a testament to our strength. Target the lead transport in their convoy. Fire a warning shot." A single disabling plasma burst across their bow. "Let them run, but let them remember who holds the leash." A torrent of plasma is not a warning. It is a promise. The Hegemony cruiser fired. A brilliant spear of incandescent energy crossed the void, but it didn't go where the Justicar intended. It didn't strike the convoy. Instead, it impacted a nearly invisible drone that had been quietly matching the transport's course, a decoy's decoy. The drone vaporized, but its destruction sent a final burst of telemetry back to the Resolute. "Impact jacks," the tactical officer called out. The warning shot was a miss, but not a wild one. They corrected for the convoy's real position, not the Ghost's. The illusion had failed. The Hegemony wasn't just watching their main fleet. They were tracking something else. The faint energy reading Lyceum had detected earlier now made a terrifying kind of sense. It wasn't noise. They seeded the approach corridor with microprobes, Rostova said, her voice grim. The deck vibrated with a sudden sharp tremor as the Resolute adjusted its position. They're tracking the convoy's unique ion trail, ignoring the larger fleet signatures. Vance's jaw tightened. A simple feint was not enough. The Justicar was more thorough than he had anticipated. The crimson timer on the screen now read SU-2-1244. The first plan had failed, and the clock was still running. A failed plan is not a defeat, but a clarification. The Justicar believes he has unveiled our trick, Vance said, his gaze sweeping over the tactical plot. He feels clever. He is now overconfident. That is a weapon we can use. He turned to the fleet mind. Lyceum, what is the energy cost for the Hegemony to maintain this microprobe sensor net? Significant, Admiral, Lyceum replied instantly. They are diverting nearly 15% of their core power to active scanning, across a wide spectrum. It is an inefficient brute force method of detection. Then we will punish their inefficiency. Vance's voice took on a sharp, steely edge. Retask the mirror lattice. I don't want a ghost fleet anymore. I want a lens. A very, very big lens. Their eyes will be their undoing. Rostova's eyes widened slightly as she understood the implication. A reflection strike, Admiral. The power feedback could be immense. We'd be painting a massive target on the lattice itself. The lattice is the target they can't afford to hit, Vance countered. He brought up a new schematic on the main screen, one showing thousands of mirrors shifting in unison. Lyceum. I want every erg of their scanning energy collected, focused, and sent directly back to its source. We will turn their sensor net into a weapon aimed at their own flagship. It was a bold, audacious plan. It wasn't about destroying the enemy, but about forcing them to blind themselves. It was a move straight from the Terran philosophy this fleet teaches by numbers and remembers by ledgers, never by collars. The cost of their aggressive scanning would be paid from their own account. Calculations are complete, Lyceum stated. There is an 82% probability of inducing total sensor overload on the indomitable will. However, I am detecting a potential secondary harmonic in the feedback loop. Its effects are uncertain. An unknown variable is an opportunity in disguise. We accept the risk, Vance said without hesitation. Begin the realignment. Jax. I want our escort frigates screening the lattice. If they fire our shields, take the hit, not the mirrors. Aboard the escort frigate, steadfast Lieutenant Hemi watched the orders cascade onto his console. He felt the familiar thrum of the ship's systems under his feet, a vibration that always seemed to sync with his own pulse during a crisis. His gunnery sergeant, a grizzled veteran named Corbin, clapped him on the shoulder. Steady now, son, Corbin said, his voice a low rumble. The Admiral's playing the long game. Our job is to hold the line for 10 minutes, not for eternity. Hemi nodded, the scent of ozone from a nearby power relay filling his senses. He was ready. The Hegemony fleet detected the change immediately. The shimmering curtain of light began to warp its geometry, shifting from a flat plane into a shallow, impossibly large parabolic curve. Its focus, the indomitable will. Justicar Valerius saw the maneuver for what it was, an act of defiance, an insult. They are angling their reflectors, he snarled. A last desperate act. Target those arrays, a full volley, teach them the price of insolence. You cannot teach a lesson you have not yet learned yourself. The Hegemony cruisers fired. Lances of crimson energy slashed across the void, not at the Terran warships, but at the delicate shimmering mirrors. The Terran frigates, including the Steadfast, surged forward to intercept. Shields flared incandescent white as they absorbed the blows. On the Resolute's bridge, a damage report flashed on a secondary screen. Port shields on the Steadfast are down to 40%, Jax called out. The Agincourt reports a hull breach on Deck 7, minor casualties. Shields are holding, but the lattice took a hit. We've lost 3% of our reflective surface. It was the first real cost of the engagement. A tangible price paid in scorched metal and wounded sailors. The deck of the Resolute shuddered as its own shields absorbed a glancing blow, and the lights flickered for a half-second. Is the lattice still viable? Vance demanded, his voice never wavering. Affirmative. Lyceum responded. The focal point is intact. We can proceed. Then hold the line. Fire the reflection, Vance commanded. There was no sound, no explosion. There was only light. The vast mirror array, now a perfect lens, caught the torrent of scanning energy pouring from the Hegemony fleet and focused it into a single needle-thin beam of pure information and power. For a fraction of a second, A new star blazed in the space between the fleets, a star aimed directly at the bridge of the indomitable will. The beam struck. It wasn't a weapon of destruction. It was a weapon of overload. Every sensor on the Hegemony flagship screamed overloaded and then went dark. The main view screen on Valerius's bridge dissolved into a waterfall of static. Tactical displays went blank. Targeting systems failed. They were blind. But Lyceum's predicted harmonic feedback did something more. The focused energy didn't just fry their external sensors, it created a resonant frequency that cascaded through their comm system. The tight beam network connecting the Hegemony fleet collapsed. Each ship was suddenly terrifyingly alone. They are blind, deaf, and divided. It worked. Rostova breathed a note of awe in her voice. Lyceum the harmonic. It crippled their local comms. An unexpected but statistically probable outcome, the AI noted calmly. They are in disarray, Admiral. Their command structure has been severed. For the next 7 minutes, they are incapable of coordinated action. The timer on the main screen read 00:21. It was more than enough time. This was the moment. The trap had been sprung not with missiles, but with mathematics. The ledger had been balanced. Signal the convoy, Vance ordered, his voice ringing with authority. Full burn straight through the gap. Signal the fleet, execute maneuver, open passage. We are not a hammer. We are a shepherd's crook. Guide them through. We do not break the enemy. We simply move them aside. The Terran fleet surged forward, not to attack, but to herd. Their ships moved with surgical precision, their engine flares like welders' torches in the dark. They didn't fire a single weapon. Instead, they used their powerful projection fields to gently but irresistibly nudge the blinded, confused Hegemony cruisers, pushing them out of the convoy's path, creating a wide, safe corridor. The sight was surreal, immense warships being maneuvered like livestock, their own power rendered useless by their lack of cohesion. Aboard the St. Jude, Dr. Thorne was thrown against a bulkhead as the freighter's engines roared to life at maximum thrust. He scrambled back to the porthole just in time to see a Terran destroyer, its hull plating scarred from the earlier volley position itself, between his ship and a drifting Hegemony battlecruiser. The destroyer's lights flashed a simple universal signal: go. We have your back. Gratitude washed over him, so potent it brought tears to his eyes. The convoy, a chain of bulky, unglamorous transports, steamed through the opening. They were the reason for this entire confrontation, and they passed through the gauntlet without a scratch. They were safe. The clock hit 0. A promise kept is a debt paid. On the bridge of the indomitable will Justicar, Valerius's systems flickered back to life. His view screen cleared just in time to show him the last of the fail-safe convoy, clearing the blockade line safely under the wing of the Terran fleet. His face a mask of aristocratic disdain contorted in pure fury. He had been outmaneuvered, humiliated, and made a fool of without a single shot being fired at his ships. His doctrine had failed. They think this is over, he hissed, his voice dangerously low. The console before him beeped, confirming a connection to a hidden asset. He had planned for Terran trickery, for their infuriating habit of refusing a straightforward fight. He had one last argument to make. A new message flashed on the Resolute's main screen. It was not a broadcast to the fleet, but a direct channel to Admiral Vance. The Justicar's face appeared rigid with hate. Your cleverness has won you nothing, Admiral Valerius spat. The convoy may have passed, but the lesson is not over. My authority extends to this entire system. The view behind him changed, showing a schematic of Kepler 186f. It highlighted 5 orbital platforms previously hidden under cloaking fields. These platforms are now armed. Your convoy will deliver its supplies, and then its crews will surrender to my authority for interrogation. Refuse, and I will sterilize the colony's primary spaceport from orbit. You have 10 minutes to comply. They would burn a world to avoid admitting defeat. The transmission cut. The stakes had just escalated from a fleet engagement to holding a world hostage. Vance had forced the Justicar's hand, and in doing so had revealed the true ugly face of the Hegemony's doctrine. It wasn't about order. It was about control at any cost. The bridge of the Resolute was silent. The elation of their victory evaporated, replaced by the chilling cold of a new ultimatum. Rostova looked at Vance, her expression unreadable. Lyceum's icon pulsed, already running threat assessments, calculating the blast radius, projecting the civilian casualties in the millions. Vance stood motionless, the weight of a world settling onto his shoulders. He had wanted to teach a lesson, and he had. He had taught the Justicar that when you push a human too far, the ledger always comes due. He had won the battle of tactics. Now he faced the battle of souls. He had won the engagement only to be checkmated on a far grander board. His gaze remained fixed on the tactical display, but his mind was on the planet below, on the millions of lives now used as a bargaining chip. The air on the bridge grew heavy, thick with the unspoken question, how do you fight an enemy who holds all the cards you value and is willing to burn the table? Lyceum, Vance said, his voice a low command that cut through the tension. Analyze the orbital platforms, cloaking method, power source, weapon systems. I want to know everything, now. Analysis in progress. Admiral, the AI responded, its tone unchanged by the crisis. Initial readings suggest a gravitic lensing cloak, high energy consumption. The weapon systems are standard particle beams capable of sustained atmospheric bombardment. Their power signatures are anomalous. They are drawing energy from a terrestrial source. A terrestrial source. The gun is leashed to the hostage. Rostova stepped closer, her own screen showing a cascade of data. He's running them off the colony's own geothermal power grid. If we try to knock out their power, we black out the entire planet. The sheer cynical brilliance of it was breathtaking. Valerius had made the colonists themselves the source of their own potential destruction. It is a closed loop of absolute control, Lyceum stated. The Justicar can throttle their power, create blackouts, or fire his weapons all from his command ship. The platforms are merely dumb terminals for his will. Vance's fist clenched at his side, the only outward sign of his cold fury. Valerius hadn't just placed a gun to the colony's head. He had forced them to pull their own trigger. This was the ultimate expression of the Hegemony's doctrine. The subject of their power was always complicit in their own subjugation. A doctrine built on fear is a house built on sand. On Kepler 186f, in a small habitation dome overlooking the main spaceport, a child named Ilara pressed her face against the transparent aluminum. "Mama, look," she said, her small finger pointing to the twilight sky. "New stars. 1, 2, 3, 5. Her mother rushed to the window, her heart seizing in her chest. Those were not stars. They were points of cold, malevolent light, hanging directly over their home like a death sentence. The low hum of the city's power grid suddenly felt like a countdown. "He believes he has created a perfect trap," Vance said, turning away from the screen to face his command crew. "A problem with no moral solution. He expects us to surrender our principles or abandon the colonists. He is about to learn that Terran ingenuity operates outside the narrow confines of his logic." The deck plates beneath them gave a low groan as the Resolute shifted its mass, a beast stirring. "What's the plan?" Admiral Jax asked, his hands poised over his console. "The Justicar wants to make a ledger of fear," Vance declared, his eyes burning with a new light. "We will answer with a ledger of truth." His plan unfolded with crystalline clarity, a strategy not of assault, but of exposure. Lyceum, that harmonic feedback from our first strike. You said it was uncertain. Did it leave anything behind in their systems, a pause infinitesimally small? Yes, Admiral, a residual data echo, a ghost signal. It is too faint to be detected by their internal diagnostics, but it is present in their primary comms buffer. I can listen through it. Their own voice will be their judgment. Then listen, Vance commanded. But you will do more than that. You will prepare to broadcast. Rostova, retask the mirror lattice. I don't want a lens, and I don't want a ghost. I want a shield. A perfect reflective canopy directly over the Kepler 186F spaceport. Rostova's mind raced through the calculations. The power draw would be astronomical. We would have to divert energy from our own shields, even weapons. We'd be a sitting duck. We will not need weapons for this, Vance stated with unshakable confidence. We are not the aggressors. We are the witnesses. His gaze swept the bridge. The Justicar thinks this is a private negotiation between two commanders. We are about to make it a public trial. You cannot hide a crime when the universe is watching. The order was given. The mirror lattice, a marvel of Terran science, once again began its silent, beautiful dance. The thousands of individual sails broke their lens formation and streamed toward the planet, a river of liquid starlight. They took up position in high orbit, weaving themselves into a protective dome of shimmering energy, a shield of light for the helpless world below. The glare from the maneuver was visible on the Resolute's bridge, casting long, stark shadows. Aboard the Indomitable Will, a sensor technician reported the maneuver to Justicar Valerius. The Terrans are redeploying their mirror array Justicar. It appears to be a defensive screen over the colony. Valerius laughed, a harsh, grating sound. A shield. A pathetic gesture. They would drain their own ship dry to delay the inevitable. It is the last gasp of a failed morality. He looked at his own ultimatum timer, 000132. Open a channel to all ships in my flotilla. Let them bear witness to the consequences of defying hegemony will. He is staging a play for an audience he does not control. Lyceum, is the broadcast ready? Vance asked. Ready, Admiral. I have accessed the Hegemony's public comms network through a series of cascading relays. I have also isolated the Justicar's command frequency. When he gives the order, the entire Hegemony will hear it. I will overlay it with a real-time casualty projection calculated from the weapon platform's energy signatures. The final piece of the trap was set. It wasn't a kill box of missiles and plasma. It was a kill box of information, of accountability. The cost of Valerius's doctrine was about to be tallied for all to see. The suit heartbeat monitor in Vance's own earpiece was a slow, steady rhythm against the rising tension. The timer hit 0. They have refused to comply. Valerius announced to his fleet, his voice resonating with theatrical gravity. Let the ledger be written in fire. Target the spaceport. Fire at will. The order is given. The account is opened. As the 5 orbital platforms began to glow, charging their main weapons, Lyceum acted. In that instant, across the entire sector, every hegemony display, every comms channel, every public news feed flickered. The face of Justicar Valerius appeared, his voice echoing his own command. Target the spaceport. Fire at will. Beside his face, a new window opened. It was a view of the Kepler 186F spaceport, with a crimson number superimposed over it, estimated casualties, 2 million. The number began to climb as the platform's power signatures surged. The 5 beams of incandescent energy lanced down from orbit. They struck the mirror lattice. The shield flared into impossible blinding brilliance, a man-made aurora. It held. On the bridge of the Resolute, the lights dimmed dramatically, and a high-pitched whine filled the air as the ship's core strained to power the defense. Lattice integrity at 90%, Jax shouted over the noise. It's holding, but it's taking a beating. Power fluctuations across the grid. The cost was real. The Resolute was pouring its lifeblood into that shield, leaving its own defenses dangerously thin. It was a calculated risk, a statement of faith in a strategy beyond brute force. A shield is a promise made manifest. Aboard the Hegemony cruiser, Vigilance Captain Drogon watched his comms screen in horror. He heard his Justicar's order, but he also saw the broadcast. He saw the projected death toll. He saw the cold, hard numbers of what he was being ordered to participate in the mass murder of civilians, not as a threat, but as a punishment for their protectors' defiance. The doctrine was clear, but the reality was an atrocity. He hesitated, his hand hovering over his own firing controls. He was not alone. Valerius saw the broadcast. He saw his own face twisted into a mask of righteous fury, now framed as a war criminal. "What is this cut that feed that is an illegal Terran broadcast?" he roared. But it was too late. The ghost signal Lyceum had used was gone. The door closed, but the message was already out. It was being rebroadcast by 1,000 other systems. The truth was loose and it could not be recalled. "The beams are weakening." Rostova reported, her eyes glued to the energy readings. "Several ships in his fleet have not fired. Some are powering down their weapon systems. They are reading the ledger." Justicar. Captain Drogon's voice came over the flotilla's command channel, his voice shaking but firm. "I must ask you to clarify your order. Firing on a civilian population of this scale. It contravenes the Hegemony's own Articles of War, Article 7, Section 4. Your duty is to obey, Captain Valerius," shrieked his composure, shattering. "Fire, or you will be charged with treason." "What is the charge for mass murder, Justicar?" Another captain's voice cut in. The rebellion was not one of violence, but of conscience. The strategic flip was complete. Vance had not turned a weapon on Valerius. He had turned Valerius's own fleet, his own doctrine, his own reputation into a cage around him. The cost of the ultimatum had been laid bare, and it was a cost the Hegemony's own officers were unwilling to pay. Their honor was a line he could not force them to cross. The orbital bombardment faltered, then stopped completely. The 5 platforms went dark. On the Hegemony public feed, the casualty counter froze, then began to scroll backward to 0, replaced by a new message: "Order countermanded by fleet consensus." Justicar Valerius was formally relieved of command pending a full inquiry. His flotilla had turned on him. Vance watched as the Hegemony ships began a slow, deliberate withdrawal from the system. Their movements no longer arrogant, but ashamed. He had won. He had not broken a single enemy ship, but he had shattered their entire philosophy of war. He had held the line. "Lattice integrity is at 43%, Jax reported, his voice filled with relief. "The energy core is stabilizing." We held. The lights on the Resolute's bridge slowly returned to their normal brightness. The coolant hiss of overworked systems, a song of victory. The Resolute had suffered for its defense. Its power core was scorched, its energy reserves depleted, and the beautiful mirror lattice was a battered, scorched remnant of its former self. It was a price Vance had been willing to pay. It was the cost of teaching a lesson, not with a sword, but with a mirror. A scar earned defending others is a badge of honor. In the days that followed, the consequences rippled through the sector. The data from Lyceum's broadcast was formally entered into the core system's public ledger. The official record stated that the Hegemony's 7th Chastisement Flotilla had been defeated without a single Terran shot fired in anger. The institutional consequence was swift. The Ultimatum doctrine, as practiced by Valerius, was officially rescinded and classified as a war crime. Hegemony fleet commanders were now required to have civilian oversight before taking any action that could endanger a non-combatant population. The Failsafe 4 convoy delivered its supplies. The retrovirals from the St. Jude reached the hospitals. The atmospheric processors hummed to life, and the terraforming catalysts began their slow, patient work of healing a world that had been brought to the brink. On Kepler 108.6f, the 5 orbital platforms were dismantled, their parts repurposed for peaceful construction, their swords turned into plowshares. Vance's arc was complete. His restraint had been forged into a righteous decisiveness that had saved a world and changed an empire. Standing on the bridge of the Resolute, Admiral Vance watched the last of the convoy ships settle into a stable orbit around the green and blue jewel of Kepler 186f. The mirror lattice, what was left of it, hung in the void, its scorched panels cooling from a bright, furious silver to a dull, quiet pewter. The Hegemony built its power on ultimatums on the belief that a final warning was the ultimate expression of strength. They saw every confrontation as a closed room with only one door, a door they controlled. They never understood that an ultimatum is not a tool of power, but a cage you build for yourself. True strength is not the threat you can make, but the choice you preserve for others, the door you leave open. The ledger of history does not remember the threats of tyrants. It remembers the choices of the free. True strength is the will to open a door, not to slam it shut.